everybody. Welcome to This Week in Pre-IPO Stocks podcast. With me, I have the world-famous Nick Fusco, CEO of PM Insights, a pre-IPO secondary market pricing company, and Evan Cohen, the one and only founder and chief operating officer of WithVincent.com. It's a media company focused on alternative investments. Clint is out this week. He's going to be back next week, he said. Before we get started with pre-IPO stocks, Nick spent the weekend in Omaha, Nebraska at the Berkshire Hathaway, shareholder event, right? Which was pretty iconic, right, with the news. But Nick, tell us what you thought. Was that your first time? Give us the rundown. What do you think? Give us a few minutes here.
Sure. So it was my first time at the event. Long-time fanboy of Warren and Charlie, and
Who isn't? Yeah.
it was a really interesting vibe. So we'll go pre and post news on this, but coming in, I didn't realize that there was so much of a local presence of Berkshire Hathaway in Omaha, the general public wanting to be a part of this, and I'm showing up in a suit and expecting that we're going to have the conference vibe and things all that. I was at the I forget which it was, one of the fun conferences just before, rolled across the street, and it was all out convention center selling Geico insurance. They're selling Brooks shoes. They're dishing out Dairy Queen. They're selling Squashmongle, stuffy toys.
Amazing.
All the portfolio companies were there, but in the most retail capitalism forward sense, just selling their gear. But all of them, including this hat, for anyone that's not on the radio right now, they put the Warren Buffett spin on things, that so many things were branded with his image. So it would be the cowboy boots, but there would be a little permutation of Warren Buffett on them and things like that. It was very, very kitsch, but cool at the same time, and that was the day leading in. And then the next day, it was a full-on, it felt like a music concert, because 40,000 or so people poured into the auditorium to hear Warren speak, and I expected more of it to be, let me tell you an update on the performance of Berkshire Hathaway, and actually very little of it was, and it was just so geared towards the Q&A, and the Q&As were more about the global world and the economy as a whole rather than anything related to the portfolio companies. And the funniest thing was when someone asked about a hot dog franchise that was actually not even part of Berkshire, and they're both up there, Warren and Jeff, Greg, scratching their heads I don't even think that's a portfolio company. They're part of Berkshire Partners, which is private equity, right? So there were so many curveballs out there that that those questions couldn't have necessarily been presented earlier or anything like that. And I think he really had so much optimism for the world in terms of where we were technologically.
Okay.
And then a significant amount of optimism just for America in general. And I think he even said it twice about how lucky he was and how lucky we were to just be either born in the USA or even just being able to do business here.
Amen.
And and it was inspiring, and everyone was cheering so many things that he was saying. And he did get asked about the cash pile, and this is I'll end up kind of leaving it, of 300,
it's 25%,
billion.
Right? 25% of their assets or something?
I think it is, and Evan can fact check, the biggest it's ever been, right?
Wow.
Because he did come off sold out significantly from Apple. Tim Cook was actually there, in the fifth row, and you'd see him stand up. It was very, very cool. And the question was asked, why do you have this cash pile? And they want to cue it up as though he would say, well, I want to make an easy succession for Greg and all of that. And then that he answered the question by effectively, as I took it, saying, now, I have too much of an ego, or I would want to get those gains myself. I'm not going to leave a fresh slate for him just so he can get a good start of having the capital to deploy to pick these companies. And then that's do the first session 2 hours, second session is another 2 hours. So I walked out at 1 hour and 55 minutes because I didn't want to deal with 40,000 people trampling each other going down from the nosebleeds to leave, walk across the street to the bar, get a drink, and immediately we look at our phones. And at that moment, he makes the suggestion that he's going to be stepping back and presenting it to the board, and that Greg would be taking it in. I'm like, no, like 2 hours ago, whatever it was, you actually said you're not going to try to make it easy for this guy, or that's how I took it. So really, it was a wild event, amazing to see. He was so on point. And even when I talked to some folks, they were actually saying he was better this year than in previous years. He was just with it,
Last hurrah, man.
So
it's iconic, dude. It's iconic to see his last one, right? I mean, come on.
Yeah,
that's like something you tell your kids. You know what I'm saying?
Highly impressive. And so many of the people you meet there, because you meet a mix of folks from the area, and everybody is flown in. There's an incredible number of international folks there, just from anywhere you could imagine. But you speak to some of the folks from Omaha, and there was a woman in front of me in line as we're getting something. She's like, yeah, I bought some B shares for $25, but I wish I had got them before because they were $5. Or like, these sorts of stories. And you're like, oh my God. So an incredible number of people just emulating him and what he's done for the country, the area. So an incredible experience, and I hope it's as good next year when there's, I think he'll still be on stage. It'll be a different dynamic, right? But I would highly recommend it for sure.
I mean, the guy,
a lot of optimism now. That's
94 years old, right?
Right.
I mean, he's not a young man, but I've heard 5,500,000% return is what I saw in the press. That's nuts.
No one has outperformed over any sort of remotely close time horizon.
60 years. 60
well, we got to get Nancy's not done. Nancy Pelosi's not done, so don't write her off quite yet. Okay,
she
guys.
Might be done.
I mean, it's amazing. Evan, what do you think? What do you think of all this?
I mean, he really is something special, and I admire just the way that he approaches the long game. And I mean, there's so many times where I've sat there and been like, I wish I had the patience. I mean, it was also just so quotable. I remember when Charlie Munger passed away, like really deep into reading Portfolio's Almanac, and started reading much more about Berkshire. And yeah, it's just really an amazing culture and what he's done, and the way that he figured out how to buy an insurance company that just effectively spits out cash that he can reinvest, float into everything else. And it's really intelligent, and from an investment perspective, and I admire him. And so, yeah, it's great to see what he's done. And I'm sad to hear that he may not be doing this every year for many more years.
Well, I'll bring you a bit of levity, because this is extremely funny when he was talking about his own life and, how there might not be that many more years to live and things of that nature. And he got into the statistics of it all, and he's thinking about Charlie, and he just goes, it's like statistically significant or something like this. I'm paraphrasing very much because I'm never going to be speaking as eloquent as he. But he said it's clear that women outlive men. And as Charlie was approaching his later years, I was encouraging him to get that sex change, but he never did. And look what happened. And I'm like, holy God, this 94-year-old Warren Buffett breaks out like a banging joke like that to who knows how many millions of people were watching.
Right.
It was just so amazing to be there in the element and hearing something like that. So very, very, very cool.
94 years old, and you're still sitting up in front of, and you're doing conversations like that. It's like incredible. It's just
loves it. 4.5 hours. It's
amazing.
Hours.
It's amazing. He's so sure. It's actually interesting. It's like aspirational. It's like you just, why ever stop? Just keep going with your own career. You know what I mean?
It's like the grandpa that everybody wants.
Yeah.
All right. So full of knowledge and like funny as hell. Yeah.
So it's so good. I mean, honestly, here's a good Warren Buffett story. Good New York. So I met this gentleman. He was probably in his late 70s or early 80s. He lived here in on the Upper East Side, right? And he was like retired, and he used to work at Dillon Reed. And he was like, "Look, I sold Warren Buffett his first growth stock." And I was like, "Come on, man." You know what I mean? He's like, no. I was a research equity analyst in like the 70s or the early 80s, and I flew out to Omaha. I covered everywhere in the Midwest. He was a German guy. His name was Hofbeck. And he's like, I flew out, and they called him the Red Baron. That was his nickname. This guy, the equity analyst, right? And he said he flew out to Omaha, and he met with Warren Buffett, and he sold him his first growth stock. And I'm like, what was the stock? He's like, I don't remember. It was 30 years ago, right? He's like, but
Right.
he's like, yeah. He was like, I was friend, and I covered Warren Buffett for many years for Dylan Reed, and I was like,
Unreal.
this is nuts. Like, what a great
How do
story.
you not remember?
You know what I mean?
How do you not remember the stock? How do you not
I
remember the
know.
stock?
That's what I was like. Well, he was like, I mean, by the way, this guy had amazing stories, right? As I'm sure, like this, Warren Buffett has amazing stories. But he was like, I was like working with ETFs at the time, and he's like, what's an ETF? And I was like, all right, you've been out of the game for a while. But man, this guy, I mean, he had some great stories. But I mean, could you imagine selling Warren Buffett his first growth stock? He's a value guy. I just like, he's iconic. Warren Buffett is so iconic, right? Yeah. I mean, I just can't believe he's hung in there for this long, right? 94, and he was still steering the ship, right? So good for him, Good for him.
He's sitting on a lot of cash right now. So what does it say? He's probably waiting for that ball to drop.
Waiting for that eToro IPO.
Dude, if I was Greg, if I was that fellow Greg Abel, I'd be shaking in my boots because now you're taking over. You got all that cash to invest. Oh, that's like more pressure. You know what I mean?
Yeah, don't babysit. Make it work.
The stock only dropped like 6% this morning, and then I think it's back up to like down 4%. I'm genuinely surprised. How resilient it has been, considering he's stepping down. I mean, I know he'll be the chairman, but it's surprising to me.
But let's say he passed, like, God forbid, like, I don't know, 2 months from now. That stock would take a nosedive. But now that the market is very clear as to what's going to occur, the handoff, you get a little bit more uncertainty. I think, getting a knock for a few percent now is way better than getting a 10% knock from a surprise,
For sure.
Yeah.
Can you think of anybody else besides like him who's such a key man to such an intricate business?
No.
Like maybe Jensen.
Dude, I remember in 2008, okay, during the financial crisis, and Buffett, I think, was it Goldman? I think he invested in Goldman, right? The guy's got the Midas. He's got the Midas, Bank of America. I mean, he's got the Midas touch. Like, he comes in and says, "I'm investing," and it was like, whoop! Like everybody around the world was like, "This company is new, must be incredible." Like,
all my buddies at Bank of America were freaking thrilled.
Yes,
when that happened.
It's everything, man. Yeah. It's like touch of greatness, right? So, I mean, he's iconic. So. That's pretty cool. All right, let's dive into it, fellas. What do you say? Congratulations, Nick, on the trip. That was pretty iconic. This is a good story to tell your kids, right? In 20 years' time. All right, so all right, guys, 3 things today. eToro. So eToro is a online brokerage firm. They do a lot in crypto. They're global, right? But they're talking about ramping up the IPO. Okay, so a few stats. They had 391 million in 2024 revenue. Okay, their last valuation was 3.5 billion in 2023. They had a SPAC deal that was going to go at 10.4 billion, but that fell through. I could probably look it up real quick on PM Insights, Nick, on where they're at right now.
So they're up roughly 50% from 2023.
Okay.
When we're thinking about where the intentions were to kind of come out. But I mean, since 2023, the revenue has just been absolutely explosive, right? Right. So it's really interesting about how the market might treat them now versus then. I'm hopeful they're going to get better treatment, to be fair.
Yeah. So, So what do you guys think? So Nick, you think this is an interesting, like, what do you think of their business? Where do you think, and then maybe further elaborate on how you think the market might take them if they go public.
Sure. I think there's a lot of focus on just generally taking investments, having a multi asset class approach to brokerage, and you could just see it like in the past year of Robinhood. I mean, Robinhood is just absolutely killing it, and that's probably making these guys have a much softer landing in the market as well. And being able to be out there, go public, might just bring them more in the public eye generally, so that maybe they would get taken out by somebody else and be a strategic bolt-on to a larger brokerage platform, which could work out really well as well. But it's nice because if you're having that sort of growth rate, not just in the valuation, which is significantly up, but in the revenue, the net income versus the revenue, it becomes really attractive and a great story. So
right.
I'm bullish on the direction on this one. I do hope they get treated well in the IPO.
Right. I mean, Evan, to that point, like revenue is up a lot. Like I'm looking here on PM Insights. It looks like in 2023 it was like around 625 million, and now they're up over $1 billion 2 years later. So that's pretty strong revenue growth. I mean, what do you think of how these guys are going to get received out in the market?
Um, I estimate that it'll actually probably have a similar trajectory to Robinhood to some extent, where there will be some nice heat when it comes out, if it comes out, and then it probably will have a little bit of a downturn. And then as they expand their ARPU and they offer more products and services to expand revenue per client, then I imagine that there will be a large opportunity to grow revenue, make higher margins, and have the Robinhood storyline, which has generally done super well over the last year, primarily driven off of the fact that they figured out revenue expansion across different products, right? The Robinhood Gold, the credit card, Robinhood Gold. Now they're doing bank accounts, the private banking, all these different features. It's like that's the growth story for Robinhood is they can run eToro can run that playbook, and they can run that playbook on a global scale, which I think is quite interesting because in the United States, there's a lot of opportunity. Sorry, there's a lot of competitors that are offering wealth management services to American citizens. I would say around the globe, it's not nearly as democratized. If you live in a country where there isn't a ton of banking services and financial services available to individuals, retail clients, like they have a much nicer opportunity to offer services that they don't have to compete for compared to other people in these markets. So it is interesting. I do worry that, like any of these businesses right now, they focus primarily on trading. That's obviously a very cyclical business. When markets are hot, trading revenues go up. When your markets go down, trading revenues dry up. And so having some other business lines where they can stabilize that revenue, expand revenue across different clients, and offer more wealth management services and banking products will probably give them a nice stability as they grow into a valuation. And again, it'll look probably a lot like Robinhood over the first 5 years of their public equity life.
Yeah. I mean, I like these guys. The global aspect that you brought up, Evan, is kind of paramount for me. Like they have almost, I haven't looked at the stats, but the last time I looked was maybe a year and a half ago. They had more international clients than they have U.S. clients. Like their U.S. businesses is, I think, relatively speaking, smaller than their international presence, right? So
for the reasons I said, it's competitive here, but a lot of the services they offer are not. They're probably the biggest player in those local or different markets.
Yeah.
And another thing, if for anyone who's bullish on crypto becoming the under rail of all the financial services, stable coins, border transactions, things like that, like they're perfectly primed should that evolution become reality. Like they'll be a great player to offer crypto services or crypto adjacent financial services to those clients as well. So if you're bullish on that sector or that theme, it's a nice investment to have.
Yeah. Well, I had the pleasure of working with some of these guys doing some banking stuff several years ago, and they were really good people. So I hope these guys crush it. Yeah, I hope they totally just crush it with the IPO. So best wishes out to eToro. All right, let's talk Epic Games and Apple, and then we can finish off with Starlink. So, all right, so Epic Games and Apple have been in like lawsuit for a long time, several years, right? And it kind of it had a resolution, but I guess Apple didn't implement it properly, and then they got a hand slap this past week from the judge, and now it's like live, right? So effectively, Apple was requiring all of the apps to use their payment platform, and you couldn't kind of go outside of that. And it was like a 30% take. Now they're allowing this lawsuit, basically, or this ruling from the judge allows app developers to go outside of Apple's payment process, which is what Epic, I think the primary thing that Epic Games was trying to get, right? So a couple things from that. One, they have a payments platform at Epic Games, which they make 12% of the revenue over the first $1 million. But then also too, Fortnite hasn't been on the iOS platform, the video game, which is a big revenue driver for Epic Games for many years now. So Fortnite's going back on too. So the stock has just gotten like beat up. It's at 19.5 billion in the secondary market. The last primary round was in February 24, and that was at 22.5 billion. So it's just kind of been hanging out there. I have it at like the 14th largest stock, 15th largest stock in the pre-IPO world. So it's a top 20 holding, right? But do you guys, like Evan, maybe we'll start with you, man. Do you think that this will open things up for Epic Games and we'll start to see some positive valuation movement now that this kind of regulatory overhang's gone to an extent?
I mean, it should. I mean, this has definitely been something that has been dragging on the entire market narrative over the last 4 years. And full disclosure, I am an Epic Games shareholder. So I've been following this quite closely, and it's been a bit frustrating that, their CEO has been pretty adamant he's willing to sacrifice revenue and growth for, what he believes is the right thing to do. And I agree with him to some extent, on the App Store monopolies. But yes, now that this has come to a resolution and, it's gone back and forth. They originally lost, then they appealed, then they won. It's like gone back and forth so many times that I think that a lot of investors have just like either given up or said, look, I just can't. I can't follow this long. I can't hold this long enough because there isn't clarity on where it's going. Right. And so I do believe that now that this is cleared up, it should at least have some momentum on the valuation. That said, this company has been private for well more than 20 years, almost 30 years, I would imagine.
Yeah. So
there's a lot of investors who have held this thing for a long time and might be looking for liquidity, but they have some patience. And so I do believe that there's going to be some volatility and people, hey, look, now's the time to sell. Like the news is looking good. I mean, I believe it went all the way up to close to 40 billion at its peak.
It did. Yep, it did.
So I think for it to get back there, it's going to take a little bit more time. We're going to need to see some of those patient holders sell, some new buyers enter the market, some revenue postings that show the growth is back on the Unreal Engine, on the App Store revenue, returning to the Apple App Store and sales there. So they have a lot to prove, but
right.
I mean, they have a really great foundation and a great brand and customers who love them. And the Unreal Engine is a massive potential boon for AI. So yeah, like I think that there's a lot of tailwinds here. So I hope that this is up and to the right for those who have held through. It's a long time. As I said, full disclosure, I am.
Right. So Nick, what kind of data do you have on PM Insights on these guys? Is the market, like, what's that market look like? The secondary market look like?
Let's see what we got.
Deep?
So Epic is an interesting one because typically there's always some sort of information on it. There's certain names that ebb and flow for information purposes. An interesting thing here with Epic, and I'll just point out, and I know we're not showing this visually on the podcast, but it's a particular name that gets a divergence between where mutual funds, 40 Act funds value the company and where the company gets valued in the secondary market. So it's been the case that, right after their round, it converged, secondary market and the mutual funds tended to market at a slight discount to where that round was. And then the mutual funds started to advance while the secondary market started to decline to a discount. That's usually, as I've seen it, a good sign for a buy, and that oftentimes that secondary market wants to re-engage where some of the mutual funds were. So, maybe some of the funds involved had a decent amount of information on it, things of that nature, like how the lawsuit was going to go and things like that. So it's like Fidelity is deeply involved, BlackRock, and yeah, I mean, I think this is a pretty big result. And the news that I saw on it was from 9 to 5 Mac, which is a publication. Yeah. They were the first to spot that the App Store guidelines were updated. And it's kind of like, in this sort of purchase, you can't do anything unless you're in the United States. And for this, the other purchase methods, you can't do anything unless you're in the United States. So it's really this is a fantastic concession that's going to benefit Epic Games significantly. So
Yeah.
hopefully for Evan's sake and all the investors' sake, it's a good tailwind. But it's so funny. It's such a name that's been private for so long. What does that even mean? Are they going to do tenders? Are they going to do a round? Are they going to do IPO? Like, what's the plan?
What's next?
I don't have the crystal ball on that, but I don't think any of us predicted Epic to be an IPO for 2025 when we asked last year, right?
I don't get the sense. I mean, there was an amazing podcast with Lex Friedman and Tim Sweeney that came out this past week. Those are like very long podcasts. I got through a healthy chunk of it, but that was actually the first time that I had the opportunity to hear Tim Sweeney talk about the business in kind of recent times. And he's like wicked smart, that guy, right? He's like a proper developer. You know what I mean? It was awesome. So, but even just hearing him talk about the origins of like Unreal Engine and like the sophistication involved in that, it was like very impressive, right? So,
and we haven't talked about Unreal Engine in 6 to 12 months.
I know.
So it must have evolved so significantly.
Oh, for sure.
I just remember nerding out on that when we first spoke about it. Did some due diligence. I'm like, this is amazing.
I love this company, and I don't think people fully appreciate like the moat that they have around some of the places that they operate in. This is just I think a classic case of non-core business items impacting the valuation of the stock. Right. So,
well, to some extent, I think that it's also a perfect example of principled founders versus business operators operating with principle, right? They're saying like, look, we're going to sacrifice revenues and profits and growth for principle. And
that's fair.
You have to be a really long-term investor to buy that. And that's not everybody.
That's true.
So for those who held through, we stuck with our principles. We believed in the long-term vision, and we're allowing a founder like Tim Sweeney, who's been in the business for almost 3 decades, say, hey, look, we believe in this guy. He's a smart dude. We believe in the business he's built and the moats that he's got. And yeah, he needs to get comfortable and believe and follow his principles and do the things that are right. And who's succeeded in doing that is like people like Jensen.
Yeah.
Right.
People like Tim Cook.
Perfect example.
And it's paid out dividends oftentimes. So it's not every time, but I think this is on a very similar trajectory.
Yeah, I like this company. I think, to your point, Nick, I think Unreal Engine is going to be a massive business for them. And I also think, there's just naturally going to be some revenue uptick being back on the iOS platform, right? So like all those kids out there with their iPhones are not going to be able to start playing Fortnite, right? When they're hanging at the park or wherever at their buddy's house, right? So that's going to be, that's going to obviously drive some revenue for the company too. So I'm very hopeful, right, that this you're still seeing valuation.
You didn't mention this, Aaron. Their last 2 institutional rounds were actually very strategic rounds, is my understanding.
Yeah,
and
Sony and Disney, right?
Lego and things like that. So they also have a ton of IP opportunity there, which is really interesting. We talked about this on this podcast. We've talked about the value of data and IP many times. And this is just a really good example of that. Like they have those really strategic investors, there's great alignment. Yeah, I think there's a lot of long-term TAM opportunity for them.
For sure. Okay, guys, let's talk about Starlink. Starlink is crushing it, right? So I am starting to really geek out around Starlink in Africa. Okay, so and I don't really ever look at Africa for anything, full disclosure. There's not really any investment opportunities there. It's like a frontier market in all the indexes. It just never hits my radar screen.
I just heard there's 4 people unsubscribe to this podcast right there. But go on.
But it's I don't know. South Africa, I think, depending on who you ask, is an emerging economy. But
more people just unsubscribe.
Look, I had I don't know, but I got to tell you, I'm starting to get into Africa because of Starlink, and some of the stuff coming out of Nigeria, some of the statistics around that's really interesting. But this week, Congo is back on. Congo has 115 million people. Okay. That's the US is 325 to give you context, right? So this is a good sized country. Starlink now has, well, and this is the thing that I've seen this, and I don't know all the stats on this, so bear with me. But Nigeria is very similar to Congo. So like mobile internet penetration's only 31% in the Congo. Okay, in Nigeria, I was looking at some stats. Like, there's a lot of people with mobile phones in Nigeria, but almost no one has home Wi-Fi. So, like, everyone just like operates off of their phones and hotspots off their phones. I can't even imagine going about day-to-day life and not having Wi-Fi. Right? That's crazy. Nigeria's got like 200 million people, 220 million people. It's like 2/3 the size of the United States. Right? So these are big countries. Is my point. So Starlink's now available in 22 of 54 African countries. That's 682 million people where it's now available. Okay. There's 1.55 billion people in Africa. So this is like, call it what, 40%, 45% of the African population can now access Starlink. They also, I don't know if you guys saw this, but this past week, they've now offered that they'll give you the dish, the satellite dish, right, for free if you commit to a 12-month subscription. Right, which I think, and I would have to think in some of these African countries, that's probably a huge barrier to entry, is paying for the dish up front, right? Happy to pay for the service, paying for the dish is maybe a little bit too much. So they got Starlink at 5 million users. This is like the public numbers that they put out, right? 5 million total Starlink users. I mean, Nick, maybe we'll start with you, man. I think Starlink's going to have like hundreds of millions of users. The stats that I was seeing from, I think the CIA had this, or the World Bank, it's like 1/3 of the world's population. It's like 2.5 billion people have no access to the internet. I think a lot of those people are like in Africa, as discussed. So like they're coming online, right?
Right.
What do you think about the Starlink business and kind of, what the potential opportunity could be for them in Africa?
So it's hilarious because you're like, I don't know the economic upside on Africa. I'm probably way more bullish on the economic upside of Africa than Africa digesting Starlink at the current price points. So I crunched some numbers prior to the podcast. Starlink, just for fun fact, accounts for about 60% of the revenue at SpaceX.
Yeah.
So almost 8 billion of the 14 billion total. And if we just could roll it back another year before that, ending 2024, the whole company was at like 8.7. So
right.
It's like explosive growth. Starlink's a big part of that. That's phenomenal. But when you back out of that 8 to the 5 million or so users, you're getting about a cost of $1,600 per user per year on Starlink-ish on average. But if you look at the GDP per capita of Nigeria, it's exactly that figure. It's 1,596, like the full, GDP of that individual person. And then Congo's almost a third lower.
Right.
Sorry, more, is about a third of that, 627.
Yeah, the price is definitely
dollars.
Be different.
So I'm like, okay, so what's the cheapest Starlink out there? Typical range is like 100 to 165, and then the cheapest is $50 per person per month, so $600.
Right.
That's why I feel this is a difficult case for Starlink, unless, like, we just talked about Epic Games earlier, the long-dated vision of the founder, investing. I don't know that Elon will have that, given his political capitals all over the place right now, that he wants to play the long game, giving up those free subscriptions and setting up all the infra.
Right.
I feel as though there are other markets that might be better low-hanging fruit to be competitive in. Like, think about anyone that already pays a decent amount for internet and they're, I don't know, not getting the fastest service because they didn't update the wire. Like, you go to Vermont and sometimes the internet's slow, so get a Starlink. So I feel like those people are gonna have the capital to pay for it way before Africa. But as time goes on, then I think that's going to be in play. But it will not be the short term. And I think Elon's time horizons are he's feeling the pinch that he has to be much more short term focused to get a lot of these on point. But
got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Evan, what do you think? What do you think of Starlink in Africa or just their business overall?
I mean, first of all, Nick, that was an excellent analysis. Thank you for that.
Thumbs up.
I am
Nick
waiting
always
for
has excellent
SpaceX.
analysis. Always.
Yeah, but I
Batting a
cheat. I
thousand.
use my own website.
I'm gonna go put a little pre-IPO spin on this. Is like this has been a discussion about spinning out Starlink from SpaceX
Right.
for at least 5 years.
Right.
And
Right.
full disclosure, I'm a SpaceX investor as well, as I think I've mentioned on this show before.
I think anyone on this podcast is, so don't worry.
Yeah, and so at the end of the day, I love to. I mean, I'm quite bullish on the long. I believe that there's billions of people in the world that are going to need access to broadband internet, and Starlink is well positioned to serve at least a small portion of them. I think this is a good example of like massive TAM, small slices.
Right.
Not to poke holes in the data here, but like at the end of the day, like connectivity to internet doesn't like or mobile phone internet doesn't necessarily require Starlink, right? Like
Right.
cellular data, LTE, 5G, like there's a million different ways you can connect to the internet. And so like Starlink, I sort of to Nick's point, I think it serves a more broadband required customer who's looking for things like streaming, who's looking for things like work output, remote working, things like that. Still, I think a massive opportunity. I mean, you see their business partnerships with like United Airlines and airline providers and things like that.
Right.
So I think there's a massive long-term business. I think he's doing a great job of executing. The business is clearly growing and humming. And if he can sustain the quality while he expands the quantity, this is going to be a big business. But then I put it to you guys, like, when are we going to spin this thing out and get some like liquidity for some SpaceX investors here?
Yeah, I don't think it's spinning out. That's my take.
So it's never going to happen.
No,
he was saying, Elon himself has said that after Starlink hits a certain revenue milestone, he does want to spin it out.
I mean, that could be true. I also think it's funding everything else that they want to do with SpaceX. Right? It's like a cash cow.
Yeah, I guess, but they can fund it anyway. They're doing the tenders and things like that. There's a million ways they can fund it. They have government grants.
You could raise capital, I guess, and dilute, but why would you do that? If, you know what I mean? If you got a company throwing off tons of cash, I mean, but maybe to your point, if they start to generate enough of a cash cushion, then and I guess you could float like 10-15% of the company, I suppose. But look, I mean, the company did let the valuation run from this last tender. They had a big pop. It'd be interesting to see what they do with this next one. So it was kind of 20% increases every tender. And now there was this big, massive increase, kind of tender to tender in just a short 6 months span of time. And so it'd be interesting to see what's going to happen with this next one that's coming up, right? If it tracks. That to me, if it does happen, then to your point of it, I think it's a tip of the cap that's this Starlink business is coming into its own, right? And they're letting the valuation run in line with that. But yeah, I don't think it's going. I think with these emerging economies like Africa, South America, parts of the Middle East, right? India. I think that I keep going back to I'm 44 years old, right? So I remember being 14, 15 years old and people being like the internet. And I was like, what are you talking about? What do you mean the internet? Didn't exist, right? And then you would go to the library. You didn't have it at your house, right? You went to the library and you would go to the library and you'd sit down and there'd be 4 computers over there and you'd sit down and you'd get on the internet and you'd be like, this is cool. You get an email address, an AOL email address, right? And the whole thing. And it was dial up.
You got to hear the.
Oh yeah, remember?
Yeah, it was amazing.
It was nuts, man. Yeah. But I remember this, and this is where I guess my mind goes with these emerging economies. I don't think it's going to be one in every home, right? Nick, to your point, the math doesn't work for these folks. You know what I'm saying? So it's more of a community gets together, and they have a Starlink at the library or at the town hall or whatever, and then people can roll in there and use it, but it's a local community thing or a group of households get together and do it. So the cost gets dispersed across a number of families or households as opposed to everybody having their own. You know what I mean?
So that's commercial opportunities. There's so many. I mean, I would think when you think of robotics, think of AI, you think of on-prem. There's just so many ways that you could again, broadband. You're going to need that.
For sure.
remote areas if you want robotics, right? If you
For
even
sure.
self-driving, we talked about self-driving on this podcast before. Like,
Yep, that would help.
having that direct connectivity, like you need that for a more industrialized urban environment.
Very
And so
true.
they're very well positioned for that. And to Nick's point, like I think that is a potentially more lucrative direct way to make revenue today than trying to sell to the communities
Oh,
in the smaller remote areas.
I don't doubt that at all. I just think that in the long run, I mean, obviously 2.5 billion people without the internet, like that's what this is. That's what the play is. Like,
Yeah.
you can saturate developed markets with, I wish I had a little bit better Wi-Fi, or I need one for my boat, or I live in Texas and my cell phone
Right.
goes out, so I'll put a Starlink in my car. Like, there's enough of those to, be meaningful, but like where you're going to go like hundreds of millions, 200 million, 300 million subscribers, has to come from these like foreign markets, right? So I'm like laser, because that's, to me, is when you start to see Starlink having 100, 200 million subscribers from these like South Africa, that's when SpaceX is going to be like a $2-3 trillion business. It's the largest company in the world.
And even
right.
Yeah, somewhere in between where, you get someone wants to update the grid for internet. Like, why bother? Let's just get some sort of subsidy, government subsidy to support like Starlink.
Yeah. So Nick,
and just put it in.
Yeah. So here's the rub. Yeah. Like, one, in the U.S., there was that whole thing, a couple years ago, with the White House kind of pulling. There was a $50 billion mandate to go and give, internet to rural cities, and Starlink got excluded from that. So I wouldn't be surprised in a couple of years' time if all of a sudden Starlink's all over the place in the U.S. Because to your point, it would make a lot more sense. But in parts like I was looking in Nigeria, I think like Nigeria, 225 million people. Don't hold me to these numbers because it's been a couple of weeks since I looked at it. But they had like 1 million home and commercial broadband connections. That's it. Wow. 225 million people country. So like, it doesn't even exist. Like, that network, right? That infrastructure doesn't even
everybody's
exist.
on mobile internet. That's how it has to be.
Yeah. That's so now imagine being a business, and it's like, oh my gosh, like, I can get this everywhere now, or I could open up my business in this city and get access to the internet. I was never even be able to do that before because I wouldn't have internet access. So
I just hope, I pulled up the map and looking at kind of the political instability and everything like that. Right. So many countries in kind of the Saharan region coming west to east have had coups since 2021, 2022. And you're just like, oh God, I don't want another Ukrainian scenario where Starlink is now being used for drone warfare and things of that nature. I'm like, oh geez.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. My mind went south on that. And
there's definitely going to be some good and bad. There's no doubt about that. Right. But first of all, Starlink will be the largest internet service provider in the world in a couple years' time. Like, I think that's happening fast. And then I think, if we fast forward 10 years and we look at where all the subscribers are going to be, it's all going to be international. I think the U.S. will be, less than 40% of their total, probably even less than that, less than 30% of their total subscribers.
What does the U.S. make up? 4% of global population?
Yeah. Ish? Right. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. So like, I think, Africa, or, China's out, and, Russia's out, but there's a lot of people in China, but like, they're going to get India turned on. They're going to that's going to be gangbusters in India. And I think there'll be gangbusters in South America and in Africa too. So it's going to be I think it's going to be really intriguing company. I was telling an advisor I work with the other day, he was like, what do you think about SpaceX in the long run? And I said, like, look, where I'm at with SpaceX right now? In 15 years time, we'll all look back and SpaceX will be the largest company in the world. It'd have like a $4 or $5 trillion valuation. And we'll be like, well, yeah, of course. Like, obviously it's the only way you get to space. And they have their internet service provider for a third of the world's population. Of course, it's the largest company in the world, obviously,
And then you got to layer in, logistics for shipping and things like that. Technically, can you put a tariff on it if it goes to outer space first?
I don't know. Right? I'm pretty sure our current administration might figure out a way to do that. You know what I mean? Like, tariff space.
Elon's in. He's in all over it.
You haven't used a free port on the moon?
Tariff from the moon. Yeah. If it's coming from the moon, there's a tariff. But like, you know what I'm saying, guys? Like, I think 15 years, it's the largest company in the world, and it'd be obvious. It's like space. It's like, of course, now it seems like a really novel concept, right? But I think this is where
Yeah.
it's trending,
I mean, that's definitely where it seems like it's trending. I will, devil's advocate always. There's obviously risks involved.
For sure.
A lot of risks.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, like, think of PacBell, think about
Yeah.
labs, think of like, all the EU and China, like, at the end of the day, someone's margin is someone else's opportunity. And so
Fair point.
I think they're in a great position. I think there's a great use case, but technology is evolving and we just don't know explicitly where everything's going yet. So just putting that out there as, again, long-term investor, would love to see a spin out and see this thing go public and then own the S&P.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. I think it's very true. I would like to see that too, but I don't know. I suppose
I'm in the camp with you, Aaron, on the spin out. I think a year or two ago, it probably was more probable, and now, even though it's larger, and Elon would have said, as it approaches a certain size, it makes sense. But I think you need the other 40% of the revenue to really be with some sort of profit margin before they want to play around. And then again, I'm thinking just the fact of him bringing together, Grok and X Twitter type situation. It's like, why does he want to split? Why would he want to put that together and then split this apart? Like, I get why, but at the same time, in terms of his mentality, I feel it's more, let's put as much together as possible at this point rather than decouple. So
I mean, unless he felt
call.
like the Starlink valuation could run higher if it was public, right? Then
it will, and you can borrow against it, and then with credit growing up, you can issue bonds, you can generate yield. Like, there's just there's so much money you can get for the other business by cash flowing the first one.
Yeah, my take on SpaceX is it will go public when Musk needs more capital than the private markets can give it. And I think that, but I like at some point he has
unlimited capital.
Yeah, but at some point he's going to need the man wants to go to Mars, and I don't even know how much money that would cost. I'm assuming it's not like $100 billion, right?
Well, he's got $300 billion.
So, but you see where I'm going with this? Like, you want to go to a different planet and set up a city on a different planet, right? That we've never been to before. Like, that has got to cost
in your lifetime.
Yeah, an unbelievable amount of capital. Right. So, like, whenever that happens, that's when I think he goes public, because he's going to need public markets.
That is so interesting, and I think it's so bang on too. There are personal motivations here that will potentially trigger a total recap of the company, because the dude wants to build a city on Mars, and we got to get there faster while he's healthy. That's
right. And
so
look, it may not be the same.
What other IPO? We just talked about eToro. We've had Reddit. We've had CoreWeave. A few others. How many of those are because the CEO wants to do something gnarly?
Yeah.
Why are we doing this?
Yeah, I think to Evan's point, being public, you get better access to the fixed income markets. There's certainly benefits like that, right? So that's where I could see, but he needs that capital. He needs a reason. I think he's going to need so much capital in such a short period of time. Right. That the only way, he wouldn't be able to get that much money from the private market. So that's
but even still,
it will make sense to go public.
We pop this thing public, we borrow against it, so he could take a holiday tour of Mars. It's like, I don't know who's going to want to give.
I don't know, man. I think
10% tariffs on Mars.
But look, he's throwing off businesses like Starlink along the way, right? So I'm sure there's going to be some mining stuff. I'm convinced that the biggest thing they'll probably ever do is mining raw materials in space. That will be the biggest business they ever have, and they haven't even started doing that yet, right? So, that's what Mars will be. You go to Mars and you're going to have the natural resources of an entire planet that you're going to be able to resource. It's a natural resource play. That's what Mars is, right?
You come up with this stuff, and then it usually takes me 6 to 12 months to come around. Humanoid robots. I'm like, no, now I'm on page with those. So I don't know. I think Starlink Internet seems to be what their biggest business will continue to be, along with potentially shipping.
Yeah.
But mining an asteroid or a planet, sure.
I
Ask
think
me
that's
again in
what
9 months. I'll
that's
probably
what it
agree with
is.
you.
Why else would you go to Mars? Like, I mean, like, so what? Obviously, multi-planetary. If Earth ever blows up, you got,
You
like
saw Total
extreme
Recall too
conscious.
many times, the movie with Schwarzenegger.
Colonization.
Yeah.
But like, like the reason you colonize other places, though, right, throughout history, is to get their natural resources.
Yep.
What's the highest value private company ever? Just curious.
I think it's Saudi Aramco, right? If I'm not
Prior
mistaken.
to IPO, maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm just wondering. Like, is there ever a world where this thing is like too big, where like we gotta bring it up?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good
$1
question.
trillion, 2 trillion? We're like, all right, come on, this is like crazy.
It's a huge company. I'm convinced it's going to be the biggest company in the world, and like, we'll be telling everyone it will be so obvious when it does get there, and but looking now, it's like this doesn't make it. Like, does that even make sense? But like looking in 15 years from now, we'll all look back and be like, of course, that made sense, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's like Blue Origin. Like somebody was like, I was on the other day with somebody and they were like poo-pooing Blue Origin, and I'm like, look. Blue Origin is going to, even if they're in the number 2 spot, that's going to be like a $400-500 billion company, right? It might be a fraction of the size of SpaceX, but the guy's going to make hundreds of billions of dollars on Blue Origin. Like, I mean, come on, like that's going to be a win for him too. It just won't be as big as a SpaceX, but it's still going to be a very, very, successful business. So like,
right. And there might be a second mover advantage there, saving significant costs, letting SpaceX do the recon on how to do things. So
plus all those SpaceX people, man, they're all like young people. Some of them maybe aren't so young, but like SpaceX, to your point earlier on Epic Games, SpaceX is a 20-year-old company, right? So sometimes those people are gonna be like, hey, I'm gonna go start my own business. And then, it's like the natural way of things, right? And they'll start space businesses and we'll have 15 of these things, in the S&P top 100 of the S&P 500 in 15, 20 years time. It's like a whole asset class. Space, right? But anyway, all right, fellas, let's end it there. Congratulations, Nick, on an Omaha trip. Iconic Omaha trip. You get something to tell your kids. I'm going to tell my kids that I knew you when you went to the.
Oh, shucks.
That's going to be my claim to fame. I knew Nick Fusk. He was there, and then I talked to him
at the event.
He was there, and he was
at the bar across the street.
At the bar. He was there at the bar across the street.
All right, guys.
Makes it even better.
Right.
I love it.
Great
all right,
pod,
fellas.
guys. See ya.
All right.